Hello Bio 2, we are continuing on with Chapter 28. Remember, we're focusing on arthropods, and now one of the groups of arthropods are what is known as insects, and this is an important group, so therefore they receive their entire section within this chapter. And one of the big reasons why they're important is because this class, the class Insecta, obviously the insects, it contains more species than any other groups of animals. So this is our largest animal group that we can find here on Earth today, and so therefore they figured it was important to give them their own their entire section, when in all reality we could spend a whole class just learning about, or a whole semester learning about insects. So before we get into anything else, we need to figure out what are the defining features of an insect, what makes them different than the rest of the arthropods. So an insect has a body that's divided into three parts: head, thorax, and abdomen. Those are the main portions there of an insect, and if you can look, and that's actually called a six-spotted tiger beetle down there, and that is going to showcase the different body parts very well. And the three pairs of legs are always attached to the thorax. So three pairs of legs are always going to be attached to the thorax and not to any other section. And insects also, they have a segmented body, typical of the arthropods. They have an exoskeleton as well as jointed appendages. And the other distinguishing characteristics of a typical insect, kind of more different than the rest of the arthropods, is that they have a pair of antennae, they have a pair of compound eyes, meaning they have two compound eyes, they have two pairs of wings on the thorax for a grand total of 4 wings, and they also have tracheal tubes that are used for respiration. So some of these terms obviously have been mentioned before, and kind of the big one that hasn't been mentioned in any other arthropods is the 2 pairs of wings that this group has as well, but everything else has already been mentioned as a distinguishing characteristic of an arthropod. And so what makes these insects so special is their responses to stimuli. So this is a big thing for this group, because they have compound eyes that are made up of many lenses, and they can detect minute changes in color and movement. So the smallest changes in color, smallest changes of movement can be detected by this group, and the brain will then assemble the information from the eye, and they'll direct the insect's response. So they can, again, they can actually have a brain that actually can respond to things in a much more advanced way than some of the other animals we've talked about up to this point. And another big thing about responding to stimuli is that insects have chemical receptors for taste and smell on their mouth parts, antennae, and legs. And so that's, again, they can pick up different chemical cues that are in the air, and which we'll get to that later on. And insects have sensory hairs that can detect movements in the surrounding air or water. So if you've ever tried to swat a fly, the reason why you ever try to come straight down on it, they fly away, is because they have little hairs on their back that detect the difference in air pressure. When you get close to them, that difference is detected by these hairs, and then that's going to kind of serve as a signal for them to fly away. And so that's another kind of interesting fact there. And many insects also have well-developed ears, so they can in fact hear you as well. So insects are pretty well evolved. And adaptations for feeding, so kind of going along with the response, one of their responses is going to be to what they're going to have for dinner on a daily basis. So insects have 3 pairs of appendages that are used as mouth parts, and they including a pair of mandibles. And then insect mouth parts have also become very specialized for feeding, so no 2 insects have identical mouth parts unless they're going to be eating identical food. And many insects also produce saliva that contains digestive enzymes that help break down food. So inside their saliva is when the digestive process begins, and that's found in humans as well. So we're going to get a quick look at some of these specialized mouth parts. So first, we have the mandibles present here on an ant, and that's just used to saw and grind food, so we've heard that before. So our next picture is going to be of a moth or of a butterfly, and they have a tube-like mouth part that's used to suck nectar. And remember the proboscis, we've heard that term before, with the leech has that, and I think this is what I made a reference to, is that a proboscis is found in moths and butterflies as well. And then the last one is a fly. They have a sponge-like mouth part that they use to lap up food. So they basically soak up their food. Flies always need some type of moisture because, again, that's how they have to eat their food. They can't really bite down and chew into it. They just kind of have to lap up any moisture that they find. So those are 3 very different mouth parts for 3 very different types of feeding within this group. So another big one, again, I kind of alluded to this with the whole wing situation, is movement and flight. So insects, they have 3 pairs of legs, which are used for walking, jumping, or capturing and holding prey. And these legs of insects may also have spines and hooks that are used for grasping and defense. So the ability to move around with their legs, as well as the addition to flight, which we'll talk about on the next slide, is a big reason why these insects have been so successful, and why there's more in this group than any other group in the world. And the flying insects will typically have 2 pairs of wings, which are made of chitin, which is the same material as the exoskeleton, so they're going to be tough. And then flight has allowed insects to disperse long distances and to colonize a wide variety of habitats. So that's, again, the reason they're so successful. They can fly, they can walk, they can move in a variety of ways. And so our last section of this chapter, I believe, is going to be, last part of this section in this video is going to be how insects develop over time, and how there's 2 different ways that they can develop. So this process change is called metamorphosis, which hopefully we've heard that before. And the growth and development of insects usually involves a metamorphosis, which is a process of changing shape or form. And they can undergo 2 types. There's incomplete and complete metamorphosis. So our first one is going to be incomplete metamorphosis, and the reason this one is called incomplete is because immature insects that undergo this process look very much like the adult. So there's not really a lot of change that happens from when they're little insects to when they're fully mature adult insects. And we call these immature forms a nymph, so NYMPH. A nymph is a young insect that undergoes incomplete metamorphosis. And the reasons why they're kind of different is because they lack the sexual organs and other adult structures such as wings. And however, over time they will gradually acquire the adult structures as they molt and grow. Here's a picture of what it looks like. Again, we can see our nymph changes very little over time. It has almost the exact same body plan as the adult. Again, we just it gets larger, adds in the wings, is basically. So that's incomplete metamorphosis. So in the opposite of that, complete metamorphosis occurs when animals hatch into larvae that look and act nothing like their parents, and then they feed and grow rapidly, and they molt a few times, and then they undergo a final molt and change into a pupa, and the stage in which an insect changes from larva to adult. So this stage, or in this one, they look nothing like it. Probably the most famous example would be a caterpillar changing into a butterfly. So they look nothing alike from when they're the young larva stage to when they're adult. But the example they give here is actually a lady beetle or a ladybug. And you can see the larva there looks nothing like it. It goes into the pupa stage, which would be similar to a cocoon, and then develops into an adult with the red spots, or with the red body and black spots. Okay, so this, I actually lied earlier. So this is how we're going to finish up this video here, is insects and humans. So many insects are known for their negative effects. So things like termites are insects, and they destroy wood structures. And there's desert locusts that cause billions of dollars in damage to livestock and crops. And then there's mosquitoes, which can obviously infect humans with microorganisms that cause disease. So this is kind of the typical rap of an insect. They kind of get a bad rap. However, there's insects that can contribute to the richness of human life. 1/3 of the food that we eat depends on plants that are pollinated by animals and insects as well. And insects produce silk, they produce wax, and they produce honey. And they're also considered as a food delicacy in certain countries of Africa and Asia. So they're not all bad. They help us out more than we could ever really imagine. So that's it for our first section of insects. Let me know if you have any questions.